You're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it's America's talk radio show about opera. It's Opera Box Score. I'm Weston Williams, joined this week by Oliver Camacho, Matt Cummings, and Ashley Hardgrave. All right, in this episode, it's an epic three-act TKO, Mozart versus Mozart versus Mozart, where the OBS team takes it to the ice to settle once and for all what is the best single act of a Mozart opera. Plus, in the 2-minute drill, Jonas takes a timeout. Is he still butthurt from being Fassbendered? Make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, click follow. On Apple Podcasts, hit the plus sign. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You'll get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. And without further ado, Ashley Hardgrave, you're back on the show.
I have missed you guys so much. Hi, friends. Hello, listeners. It is delightful to be here. It is also a really, wow, boy, is it a weird week to be employed by Northwestern.
Really?
I don't know.
No, really, yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but yeah, the plot thickened even more today. So Pat Fitzgerald, the head coach who's been there for forever and is also an alum of the program, is out and he's lawyered up. Jim Foster, the baseball coach, has also been fired by President Michael Schill. And the latest news is that 8 players have hired civil rights attorney Ben Crump. Yes, the one of all of the civil rights notoriety, we will say, of 2020, to pursue legal action against the Northwestern football program for hazing. This feels like a lot of hullabaloo for a coach with a 52% win record over the course of his career, but at any rate, it's getting messy. Stay tuned.
Only slightly better than a coin flip.
I mean, we're a family podcast, but I would like somebody to explain to me what a car wash is. I still can't figure that out. So.
Nope, not on this podcast.
We can't do that without getting marked explicit, Oliver. I will also say that when I read the story about what Jim Foster is accused of having done, I was not sure whether or not I was just reading a plot summary of A Few Good Men. Because that also literally is the plot of A Few Good Men. So people really should have learned not to do that by now.
It's not great. It's not great.
No.
Well, Weston, welcomed Ashley onto the show, and you've just been listening to the voice of Matt Cummings. And I'm here, everybody, too. It's Oliver Camacho.
The gang's all here.
Should have started with me, but that's okay. We should get to. I have some Wimbledon for people who didn't watch the Wimbledon men's final.
Wow, it was crazy.
Yeah, we could talk about it in the next break. But let's talk some opera, huh?
Let's do it.
TKO on the OBS.
After taking a 14-month break, TKO is back. And let's be honest, with the slower summer news, we could use something to spice up these off-season OBS episodes. So, we're going to go with an epic Mozart brawl in 3 periods with all 3 of you guys. Oliver, what's this all about?
Well, I was thinking about this as I was watching Natalie Stutzmann conduct the Magic Flute, having just conducted Don Giovanni, like really in a back-to-back HD blowout, and they were both so good, and it just made me think, like, what is the best Mozart opera? And can we actually even be more granular? What is the single best act of a Mozart opera? And we could talk about, Clemenza di Tito Act 1. I love that act, but I think it's a snooze fest for a lot of people, Is there a best act of Lucio Silla? Is there a best act of Il Sogno di Scipione? I'm sure there is, but if we're really going to get down to, like, if you had to, like, put up a Mozart opera act against, Aida Act 3, or up against La Bohème, Act 3, what
Carmen
would be
Act 2.
You're an Act 2 Bohème person?
Of Carmen, I said.
Of Carmen. Yeah, Carmen Act 2, exactly, yeah. What is the best Mozart act to represent the genius of this composer? And let's be honest.
Loca del Cairo, done.
So over the course of the next 3 weeks, Matt, Ashley, and I are going to back an act And eventually we will have Weston and George be the judge. I know they're the worst.
I was about to say, like, the most qualified people you could do. I mean, did an opera even exist before the Tristan chord?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and we know
That's
that
what makes it
George
fun.
George will be only concerned about transitions and stuff like that. So we'll have to.
Yes, that's perfect for me.
Well,
So-
let's start with Ashley. Ashley, well, give us the sort of general lowdown of not necessarily the act that you've picked, but the opera you've picked, so we can like dive into the act later. What is your case to be made?
Well, Weston, I'm going to give you a little bit of both. And my pick's going to be a little bit controversial as the sole lady of the hosting panel. I'm going to go with Così fan tutte, most specifically Act
This is-
1.
This
of
is very
Così fan
much an
tutte.
only Nixon can go to China moment, I think.
That it is. So, okay, here's the thing. It is not exactly the greatest towards ladies. It is not exactly the most interesting, dramatically speaking. It is, but it's got such a beautiful, sentimental place in my heart for any number of reasons. Have I been in this opera more than once? Yes. Did I play Despina both times? Yes. Does that surprise anybody? Absolutely not. So here's the thing. We talk about our friend Così. The translation is, okay, first of all, this is my first hill I'll die on. The actual translation is so do all or everybody's the same. Stop pulling this women are like that crap. That's not actually what it is there. Stop
Women
doing
are
that.
not like that.
Women be not shopping.
Women be done with your ish. Okay, so here's the thing. Così is a really peculiar piece. Like, it doesn't pass any Bechdel tests, and frankly, it's not great for people of my gender in specifics. But here's the thing. I will be fine if I never sit through another production of this again as an audience member. However, the music is absolutely stunning, both for the singer to perform and for the listener to experience. You know, there aren't that many operas that, like, I'll just play round the house for their beauty while I'm doing my dishes, but Così is one, most specifically the music of this first act. The trio, you know what I'm talking about. We'll talk about it when we get there. It's good music with, on surface level, very little worry. You can go deeper with this, and Act 2 does go a little bit deeper with this, but in the beginning, you're just presented with this beautiful musical landscape. This act is not in the fight in the TKO for its drama, or for its verisimilitude, or even the vocal prowess that's needed to do this, but you do need it to pull it off well. This is really here for the sheer, unadulterated beauty of the music, and ultimately, don't we all want opera to just be beautiful?
Again, you're that's a bold thing to say when I'm one of your judges, Ashley. But you know,
You're losing your judge.
yeah.
No,
Maybe
I
we'll
wanna-
work on George.
I want to keep going in this because, as many people know who listen to my other podcast, Così fan tutte is heads and tails like my favorite Mozart opera and my favorite opera of all time. And it's not because
You're gonna get canceled for that, Oliver.
I know. It's because it's like I said, I like the movie Tar. I'm going to get canceled. So we never heard, by the way, Matt Cummings' review of Tar. We still have to do that one day.
Oh yeah.
We will.
No, but you were talking about vocal prowess. I think, yeah, there are clearly operas in the Mozart canon that ask more of the singers, especially operas like Abduction from the Seraglio or even Clemenza, the opera seria. But I think what's amazing about Così is that the characters of Fiordaligia and Dorabella, it seems like they're socialite women that go to the opera. They go to see opera seria. And in the first act especially, they don't know how to express their real feelings, so they rely on opera seria tropes. And there's Despina saying, what are you like? You've got to be so dramatic about everything, don't you? You know, like Zmania Implacabili is like a rage aria right out of an opera seria, you know? And Fiordaligia does it a little bit more in a sophisticated way. She actually uses opera seria vocal tricks to express her rage or to express her depression or to express her sense of betrayal. You know, she does all these things in extremes, you know? So in a way, it pulls in Mozart's writing for opera seria characters. So we get this mixture of ostensibly real people and high art, that is not has nothing to do with verisimilitude. I can never say that word,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I love about it, is that it's very, like I said, you can go surface and gentle and play it for laughs, play it for funs, play it for beauties. You can eventually play it for deeps, especially in the second act. You can really sort of drill down into, emotion, character, the human condition. But if we're just talking about like the overall concepts, okay, Mozart, when he's writing this one, he gets to business with what I call his usual Da Ponte collaboration joint. So he's got these tonal harmonies with some gotcha passing tones. He's got just enough counterpoint to keep it interesting, but not confusing. Sonata form, this is not. Each of the 6 characters, especially in Act 1, they have these little moments to shine. And as my friend Oliver Camacho pointed out to me, salada fermatas in this piece. There are, you said more fermatas than any other opera. Is that what you said?
Any Mozart opera, yeah. It has the most fermatas, yeah.
Salata Fermata would be a great drag name, just putting that out there.
That's true,
yeah,
that's true.
it's him stopping time. Like, he wants to explore a feeling. He wants you to really know what this is about, and also give certain vocal beauty moments just a chance to like just breathe,
Yeah. Let the singer sing.
Yeah, and like I think that has to do with the pace of the drama too. Like, there are a lot of things happen in this opera, but it's really all set in one set, like it's like in the house of these two sisters. We get the first scene of the first act that's not there, but everything else is like set in this one place. So it does feel like a reality TV show in a way. It's like set in like the villa, the real housewives of whatever Ferrara, so.
Agreed. And one of the other things that I love about this, besides the sheer beauty, is when we think about like practicality, not in personality of the characters, but in production. This is a storefront to a house friendly piece. You can kind of do it anywhere. It's
true.
the classic white button down, if you will, of operas. You can kind of do this wherever. You can dress it up, you can dress it down, you can put the chorus in, you could absolutely leave them out. So again, you can do this in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different settings. When we look at some of the more, the feature pieces, let's talk about these arias. Oliver, you've mentioned Zmanie. It is arguably the most adorable and the most ridiculous mezzo audition piece out there. It really lets any mezzo that's doing this for an audition stretch their acting chops and pop out some beautiful, big, forceful high notes. Despite my weird, low vocal fry speaking voice, I'm classified as a lyric soprano, and I am most jealous that mezzos get to do Zmanie. It's one of my favorite arias, and sometimes I'll sing it just for kicks and just for me. Then we move on to our sweet...
No.
Go ahead.
I love that you're going this direction, but so you're basically saying the act you're going to choose is Act 1. So why Act 1 over Act 2?
Great question, Oliver. Act 1 over Act 2 for me here is, again, if we're talking about sheer beauty and entertainment, if that is the reason that you want to go to see an opera, this has that in spades. Like I said, you can go deeper into the drama and the action, but it is so incredibly silly. It is so incredibly lighthearted. The music is beautiful, and it's just complicated enough to keep it interesting. It is for singers like a hug to perform. It's just such a wonderful piece. Again, for the theater goer, you can enjoy it some. You can enjoy it a lot. For singers in particular, they always stay more engaged in this type of piece because you can just, like I said before, let the singer sing and enjoy. So yes, that's why I'm leaning on Act 1 instead of Act 2. I'll give it a comparison to a musical later that I think will make a bit more sense. But again, when we're looking at some of these solo pieces, we've talked about Zmanie and how it's amazing. Then we move on to our sweet little comic relief Despina. Poor Despina and her In Womany aria. She's got a lot of thankless music in this piece, but she is one of the things that dramatically moves things forward and keeps it together. And frankly, she understands men better than anybody else on that stage, John Alfonso included. It is, however, a heck of a way to make an opening scene. Like I said, she really does provide the glue that keeps the ridiculous pieces of this act together. And then we move into, speaking of the opera seria dramatics, our good friend Come Scoglio from Fiordiligi. Again, It is as equally adorable and ridiculous and beautiful, and it gives worthy sopranos and some less so a chance for some real vocal fireworks and sturdiness. And it is really, again, we'll talk about Per Pietà another day because it is also absolutely stunning. But just on the face of like, we are setting the intention for who all of these people are. Come Scoglio, you know exactly who Fiordiligi is as soon as she finishes those final notes. You know who she's going to be for at least the next, 45 minutes of the opera. And then we move on to Un'Aura, which is, my sweet little Ferrando finally gets to sing. We hear from the tenor, and it took all the way to the end of scene 2 for us to get there, but we finally hear from him. What I love about this, when you mentioned the opera, seriously, that's why he comes in so late, because he's been trying to get the gentle high notes to come out. And so the thing I like about this is that you mentioned sort of the seria and the dramatics and not quite romanticism. Un'Aura is back. It's gentle, it's soft, it's simple, it's gorgeous. And those gentle tenors that have more than the high hook, these guys get a chance to shine in this aria. And that's one of the things that I love about it. And if you act it right, you almost believe Ferrando in that moment. Well, I do anyway, because I'm a sucker for some soft, gentle high notes. I want to talk a little bit. Go ahead.
We have to move on because we're actually running out of time. So we're going to pass it off to Matt and see what opera he's chosen. But as long as you've mentioned Un'Aura, in a way, it's the most old-fashioned piece in the entire first act, because he is like a sentimental guy. He believes in love, and he sings this piece that has a very clear form and, is very elegant. Whereas, as we said already, Despina is singing. She's the comic relief, and Fiordiligi takes herself way too seriously, and Dorabella takes herself way too seriously. And it doesn't seem authentic. So in a way, it's the first authentic love song, and maybe the only authentic love song in the entire opera.
And that's why I go for Act 1 instead of Act 2. We'll get in more, I think, in another episode coming up very soon. But let's go ahead and just close out with a clip. What are we going to listen to, Ashley, to encapsulate this for us?
Well, I mentioned that trio. I think we know what this is. But in case you don't, my absolute favorite trio my absolute favorite trio of most operas is the Act 1 trio between Fiordiligi, Dorabella, and Don Alfonso. Suave sia il vento is what I usually call it, but whatever. So this recording is going to be, it's going to be Federico von Stade, Kiri Takanawa, and Jules Bastan singing Don Alfonso. Any part of this is perfect, Weston. You can just drop the needle, hit play. All of it's a big hug.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Let's move on now to Matt Cummings, who's going to bring the heat with his selection to go up against Così fan tutte. What is the absolute powerhouse of an opera you are going to use to take out Così?
Everyone listening to this podcast, I'm sure, has a very vivid memory of the first time that they tried to explain the plot of The Marriage of Figaro and found themselves way over their heads. I know I do. It's a rite of passage, and very few have survived their first attempt. But I think compared to there's kind of a trope about opera plots being ridiculous, but I would say that the ratio of plot twistiness to sublimeness ratio of this opera in particular is off the charts. Even ones that have a fraction of the amount of twists as here can reach the absolute levels of like humanity and perfection that we're talking about when we talk about Nozze. It is a well-oiled, like almost a Rube Goldberg machine where every piece has to be in exactly the right spot for the little pendulum to come hit it into the cup. And it is zany, and it makes a liberal use of coincidence, but it remains at its center always a piece about humanity and that Enlightenment ideal that we always talk about, Mozart exemplifying, the liberté, égalité, fraternité, and all that. And I think it shines especially bright in Nozze because it's a fundamentally optimistic piece, but not one without like a pretty vicious bite against the aristocracy and those who are not holding up to those ideals. Because what really stands out to me about this opera is that these characters feel like people. They all feel like people. There are definitely formal considerations that are that are taken into account here, and sure, the plot itself is Beaumarchais, not Mozart himself. But what really keeps the complexity of this narrative from being overwhelming is that in the heat of the moment, a manageable amount of things are actually happening at once, and the things that happen in their own way make sense.
Yeah, I'm never, like you said, Matt, explaining this plot can be confusing, but I don't think I'm ever really confused when I'm watching this one.
When you're watching it, it's not confusing. Like, each bit like comes in its own time. It's just when you're summarizing and you're like, oh, and also 20 minutes ago there was another letter that other character sent that I forgot to tell you about.
It is an 18th century stage work, so like, that's just kind of how it goes.
And with that comes political commentary.
Ooh.
This is pre-French Revolution theater, and you can sense that class tension. It like if you're not watching a very trenchant production of this, it can seem unassuming or cozy, but this is daring theater. Like, Mozart is making a statement. He's very clearly siding with the lower classes and harshly critiquing the aristocracy and their actions their like take what you can and like leave the rest for the dogs, with the way that basically every character is on a team against the count. And there are so many characters, but each one is really crucial and deployed at exactly the right amount. There are no like bit parts who overstay their welcome or principals who like you constantly feel like you have to apologize for. But because the opera is
You mean there's no Monostatos in this show?
If only. But it's like a little musical jewelry box and it's just chock full of hits. And by the time you get to the finale, you've been sitting for close to 4 hours and you're maybe ready for it to wrap up a little bit, you're treated to possibly the most beautiful 2 minutes of opera with the Contessa Perdono sequence where the forgiveness is really laid out on a silver platter and just given to both the Count and the audience.
I mean, it's all about that forgiveness, right? It's a very sort of Enlightenment idea, that like, even though there's also this like, class struggle aspect to it, there's always this notion in Mozart operas that you can kind of improve yourself if you only like decide to act rationally and not like a big jerk, It's kind of a nice message to have, especially, I feel like it really hits really nicely in this one as well.
So what makes... I mean, you said that the most beautiful music in maybe all of opera is the 2 minutes near the very end of the show.
Well, it's in pretty stark competition with every other minute that comes before it.
But does that mean that Act 4 is the best act of a Mozart opera?
Act 4 is... Act 4 does not have the same kind of balance, like get you a girl who can do both energy that I think Act 2 has. It's much heavier on the zany and the plot twists than it is on the moments of humanity. Like,
Just really quickly, just for those of us who don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of Marriage of Figaro, where are the bounds of Act 4? Where does Act 4 start and where does it end?
So Act 4 starts with little Barbarina coming on stage saying, "I lost the pin," and it goes until the end.
Gotcha.
Through the literal labyrinth of a finale where characters are swiping at each other in the dark, and it's very funny and one that maybe George would pick as the most fun act to direct in all of opera. But I don't think
playing to the judges there, Matt.
But I don't think it lives up to like the absolute heights of Act 2. Now, Marriage of Figaro is a 4-act structure as opposed to the other two Da Ponte operas, which are 2-act. So Act 2 is like a little bit leaner than some of these other supersized choices. But the whole universe of this opera is contained within those 45-ish minutes. It's magnificently paced, and even the parts... and every single part of it is serving dramatic purpose. Like, even the parts that aren't quite as musically memorable are very dramatically important. And we get that from the very beginning when the act opens on the Countess in bed, longing for the Count's love that has been taken away from her by his wandering eye. And this is just such a tonal shift from the antics that wrapped up Act 1, the Cosacento trio, everyone's running around an armchair and taking turns hiding in it, behind it. It ends with like this big send-off to Cherubino with Non più andrai. That isn't even really much of a send-off at all, because here he comes in just a few minutes, he's always there. But just the way that by the time that long orchestra introduction finishes and the Countess sings her very first line, you have an idea of who she is. Yeah. Those arching lines are so aching for love, and she's so noble. And within seconds, the whole audience is looking at the Count like, WTF is wrong with you? It just establishes character and as a baseline, and then goes from those table stakes like again and again and again within this act.
And how daring to, put really the principal character for her to not even make an entrance until the second act. And what an entrance it is. I mean, you're already talking about Portia Moore, but like you said, it's exquisite. It's Mozart at his finest, and it's a miniature on top of that. Like it's not even that long, but it tells you everything you need to know about her.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of preparatory work to get later plot twists under control here. And this is where like a lot of the arias mostly live. But even here, there's a lot, like, the arias are more action-oriented than just embodying an affect or be, like, having a dramatic temper tantrum. There's lots of things that people have to do. They have to write letters. They have to find a disguise.
We all know how much you love open letters, Matt, so this is really perfect for you.
Maybe the Achilles heel of my argument. Well, these are closed letters. These are directed to one person.
True.
The Count, and you like get to get a sense of what a normal day without the whole folie de la journée of this estate. That's the subtitle of Marriage of Figaro. What it would be like to just be in the Countess's employ, and like that she's a really great boss actually, because she treats you like a person, and on top of all of this, you're safe from someone's philandering. And it just feels very real, and it feels very lived in. And the groundwork is set so exquisitely for the second half of the act, which is pretty much all taken up by the 25-ish minute finale, to just absolutely take flight.
Okay, so you're saying Act 2 over Act 4. Just can you give me a little bit of argument? So what are the Act 1 and Act 3? I mean, I know what the Act 4 weaknesses are, and Act 4 is actually generally cut because you have too many compromario arias in there. But what makes Act 2 better than Act 1 and Act 3?
Act 1 is also wonderful, but it's really all exposition, and you don't get the payoff of that exposition until you get to Act 2. So you're reaping the rewards of all of these seeds that have already been sown, with additional layers of conflict, with people, trying to outsmart each other, with people trying to go behind each other's backs, mostly the Counts. Act 3 I also think is great, but the ending is the
a finale mark, yeah.
Yeah, the ending is it's like the middle episode of a trilogy kind of an idea. Like it ends with the marriage itself and this contra dance, but there are not the same kind of like absolutely satisfying vocal fireworks that I'm partial to. And it feels very unfinished in a way that Act 2 does not, where Act 2 is much more like it's the most complete kernel of story within any of these 4 options.
So what do you think is the piece of that act that most exemplifies why I should pick this as the best act of Mozart opera?
And the argument for why the Act 2 finale is a great piece of music goes so far beyond trio, quartet, becomes quintet, sextet, septet, octet. But that quote from Amadeus does encapsulate just the absolute genius of this musically, where characters are appearing seemingly out of thin air and just in the nick of time, and they're accompanied by these musical shifts that are so seamless that you don't even see those seams until they're in the rearview mirror. Like, it swings wildly from different affects to affects, but everything feels so natural, and the stakes are just constantly being raised, where the tension is rising. They're almost caught in their trickery so many times, but manage to pull it out just in the nick of time. And that central tension even like reinforces the nature of this ensemble that just keeps rolling down the hill out of control, because the characters are all wondering, are we going to be able to get to the finish line before something bad happens? And the Count is wondering, is Marcellina going to come in with the contract that will nullify their marriage before they make their way out of my trap? And so the way that the way that like internal tension of the scene lines up with the audience's experience of wondering what's going to happen next makes it like reinforce itself so well that you almost feel like you're in like you have skin in the game with these characters, and it just never finishes. It only keeps transforming into something that's more exciting than the bit that you had before. And I do want to keep some of my powder dry for next week, so I'm not going to go into full specifics. But if there's one moment of this finale that I think exemplifies everything that Mozart is able to do and everything that makes Marriage of Figaro a special piece, it is going to be in this moment of the quartet section of the finale. And this comes from the Glyndebourne production of Sir Peter Hall's production of Marriage of Figaro with Kiri Tikanoa, Ileana Kotrubash, Benjamin Luxon and Knut Skram, and the London Philharmonic Orchestra and John Pritchard conducting.
So, Matt, you say you're keeping your powder dry, but I believe the central sports metaphor that we've done so far is hockey, so I think it should be ice. But I don't know, and as an Alabamian, I only know about football and I don't know about cold things, so you might be right.
I think hockey players must use powder somewhere on their preparation,
Probably.
Maybe.
If you're a hockey player, please contact us at operaboxscore@gmail.com and let us know. And it looks like we're running out of time for you, Oliver, but do you have a little teaser for next week for what you're going to bring to the table?
I think we got to keep it Mozart da Ponte, so that's all everybody needs to know.
The Battle of the Da Pontes on
Yes.
Opera Box Score. let's keep that teaser in mind and talk about tennis updates. Oliver, this is the part that everyone tunes in for. What is happening at Wimbledon?
Last week we talked about how it's an inevitable march for Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz to make it to the final. And that is indeed what happened. And most people were predicting Novak Djokovic to win and to tie Margaret Court's record for having the most Grand Slams. But Carlos Alcaraz actually pulled it out. And it was a very dramatic, almost 5-hour long match. And in the end, Novak Djokovic started to look human. And if one good thing can be said about, this rivalry that's now being set up is that it makes Novak Djokovic look beatable. And Novak Djokovic is sort of like a robot, and it's sort of not fun to watch him play because you just see him, use his Terminator metrics that he has in his field of vision, like what he needs to do to defeat an opponent. And even when he comes up against a challenge with an opponent, his game always improves, and he figures out a way to beat that opponent.
Like in The Incredibles, with with the machine that kills all the superheroes.
Yeah,
exactly.
So Novak Djokovic is that machine, but we saw him, fail. And that is actually so humanizing for him. And I think...
Like when Mr. Incredible destroyed that robot.
What I'm saying is that Novak Djokovic is actually a very unlikable... He's one of the most unpopular champions.
Like Syndrome from The Incredibles.
And I think people saw him and maybe felt a little sympathy for him. And even in his... concession speech or whatever, like the runner-up speech that he had to make, he almost cried. He came really, really close to crying, but he stopped himself. But I think he should just let us see that part of him. And I think that will make him more likable. That's my advice to you, Nole. I used to be a big fan of his when he was new in the
and
tour.
Wasn't an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah, when
Robots
he was just a clown.
Don't need vaccines, so
he used to do like impersonations of his peers, and it was sort of funny. And he would, hike up his tennis shorts like really high, like past his stomach, and like he would just do really silly things on the court, and it was enjoyable. But then he became like this, whatever, gluten-free, no vaccine. He wears like this weird patch in the middle of his chest that like has like some electric thing that like sends shocks through his body. I don't know.
It's called a battery, but sure.
No, seriously. Like when he takes off his shirt, you see he has this weird like battery pack. Yeah, right in his sternum. Like he's doing all these weird stuff, and like and he's so incredible physically and indefatigable. But I think in order for him to become more likable, we need to see his weaknesses. So. And then people will cheer for him. And I think that's the missing component. If people were to cheer for him, he might be able to push through an opponent like Carlos Alcaraz,
He needs to learn to feed off the power of human emotions.
Yes,
if you believe.
He needs to be forgiven by the Countess. So
send us a voice memo or email us your hot take on opera or tennis at operaboxscore@gmail.com. You'll get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take, and you won't have to sit through 5 hours of tennis to do it. Just 2 minutes of the 2-minute drill.
This just in, the 2-minute drill.
All right, listen up. Here's everything you need to know about what happened in Operaland this week.
Kyiv's National Opera of Ukraine is marking a full year of productions despite air raid warnings, cancelled performances, and other wartime limitations. Artistic director Anatoly Solovianenko said that the opera remaining open has been important for many patrons. Quote, "At one performance, audience members told me that they came to the opera because it was like a portal away from everything going on now, even for just a few hours."
Conductor Alberto Veronesi protested a production of La Bohème by blindfolding himself while conducting. Christophe Guéral's concept for the Puccini Warhorse at the Festival Puccini di Torre del Lago updated the setting to depict the Parisian student protests of 1968. The festival called the protest disrespectful to the performers, and some audience members even called Veronesi a clown and imbecile. Giorgio del Gingaro, mayor of Viareggio, joked that maybe the conductor simply wanted to show that he knows the score by heart.
The Bayreuth Festival will be departing from the canon in 2026 with a production of Rienzi, according to Intendantin Katharina Wagner. Rienzi was Wagner's first big success as a composer, but he never considered it worthy of his festival. His great-granddaughter disagrees. Quote, I'm sure Richard Wagner, in his artistic restlessness, would have enjoyed Rienzi from today's perspective.
Shouldn't she say, I'm sure great-grandpapa or something?
Grandpapa.
First names only. On the disabled list, Anita Rachvelishvili has released a statement on social media regarding her recent cancellations and health issues. Quote, I've had very, very difficult last couple of years. My health was getting worse and I tried to stay strong and keep going for my family, for our little angel, for opera, and for the love that I have for what I do. I tried hard, but as you know, we cannot force our health. I feel better and I'm being treated by the best team of doctors and will be back very soon.
Jonas Kaufmann has canceled his participation in concerts at Aix-en-Provence due to the side effects of a strong cocktail of antibiotics to fight a drug-resistant respiratory infection. Said Kaufman, although I am very disappointed, I am glad to have finally found the cause of this persistent issue, and now I only have to give my body the necessary rest to cope with this infection.
Exit stage right, British composer Anthony Gilbert has died at the age of 88. He was a staunch advocate for new works, even working at music publisher Schott as chief editor of contemporary music. Gilbert also wrote 2 operas, The Scene Machine and The Chakravaka Bird.
A bop.
Pianist Margaret Singer has died after a long illness at age 84. A Fulbright scholar, Singer served on the faculties of the Diller Quayle School of Music, Turtle Bay Music School, and was engaged as a vocal coach at Juilliard. She also served as assistant conductor at both the New York City Opera and San Francisco Opera, as well as a vocal coach for the Meryla program. Among her many roles, she was also a music administrator of the Opera Company of Philadelphia and led the opera department at the Salzburg Mozarteum.
Australian soprano Margaret Josephine Nisbet has died at age 94. Nisbet was a leading lady at houses including Melbourne Opera and London Sadler's Wells Opera Company, as well as being featured in a series of TV operas with the Australian Broadcasting Company in the 1960s.
And on this day, July 17th, not much happened. In 1831, it was the birth of German soprano Therese Tietjens in Hamburg. In 1877, Otto Dessau conducted the Vienna Philharmonic on its first concert tour to Salzburg, leading to the establishment of the Salzburg Festival. In 1914, American soprano Eleanor Staber was born in Wheeling, West Virginia. In 1927, it was the first performance of Darius Milhaud's The Rape of Europa in Baden-Baden. Happy birthday to American composer and satirist Peter Schickli, also known as Petey Q. Bach, born in Ames, Iowa. Happy birthday to American soprano Dawn Upshaw. And on this day, July 17th, it was the first performance of Olle Salinen's opera The Horseman at the Savonlinna Opera Festival in 1975.
And that's your 2-minute drill.
Just a little bit of the birthday girl Eleanor Staber from the legendary recording of La Fanciulla del West from the Maggio Musicale Fiorentino, conducted by Metropolis. That performance or that production came with the story of the donkey that decided to not participate in the dress rehearsal, and so they had to find a horse. And it was some weird story about the American soprano riding the horse at the Maggio Musicale. There's a better telling of that story, but it does have to do with Eleanor Staber getting on a horse that didn't rehearse.
Oh my goodness!
No rehearsal.
Oh my goodness! This is the kind of jokes we can get away with when George isn't here.
But this is also like shows how we need to have an ombudsman or something like that, or somebody who does like
a public editor to help fact check our anecdotes on stories.
We're just making new anecdotes up, but something about Eleanor Staber and a horse and Maggio Musicale Fiorentino. It's a story, I promise.
Put it all together. It's it can be whatever you want it to be.
Take out the embezzlement. It's fine.
I think I think that, of course, the most impressive story this week is, of course, in Kyiv, where they've been putting on operas for, well, not just operas, but also ballets, for a year now, despite the war going on. And this was also the close of their 155th season, too, which is not like the most, like, round number in terms of historical ones, but it's a big one.
I'm sure it feels like their 165th.
Oh, I bet it does. I bet it does. I mean, even now, well past the, initial, like, shelling and surrounding the city from Russian forces, they still have, the bunker ready to go. There's a legal limit of how many audience members you can have in the house because too many won't fit into the bomb shelter underneath the opera. But people still come. They still perform.
They still have to have like air raid warnings,
exactly.
during rehearsals and stuff like that.
There's a Guardian story that I read. Apparently, so there were some concerns earlier on in the war that they're putting on La Traviata, and someone, I think, from the Ukrainian government said, well, maybe you shouldn't put this on because she dies at the end. That's going to be a big bummer.
It's one of the journalists who was talking to Solovyonenko.
That's right.
According to this article. Yeah.
And he said, no, that's silly, because it's La Traviata.
We can't change Verdi, yeah.
Can't change it. So they put on
no
the show.
Ambroise Thomas with a happy ending to Hamlet.
But they did the show, and they got almost to the end before La Traviata, before she dies. And then an air raid hit, and they all had to go hide in the basement. And so for that night only, she lived. So, I just think that's such a vivid story of wartime art making. And really, it really is extraordinary that they've been able to keep it going.
It would be amazing if it happened right at that moment in Act 3 when she says, I'm feeling like I'm getting stronger. I'm getting stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So Violetta made it that one time, but I really like whenever I hear stories about what's going on.
So if that's the most inspiring story of this drill and of whatever of this year, probably, where do we rank this story about this conductor?
Most eye rollingest story.
It's what I always say. Regie Theater can't hurt you if you don't look at it. This is a bizarre story. There's actually a photograph, kind of a blurry photograph of him conducting with the blindfold on. Someone saw him do it and like pulled out their phone in the middle of the show and was just like, what the heck? It's so strange to me. Like I don't know. Obviously, I don't know the production. I don't know exactly how edgy the production was being. But what a rude statement to make about, the work that everyone's put into your show, I think it's extremely funny. I think it's very rude, and I'm really curious to see the production that could have warranted such a reaction.
I honestly am mostly proud of the Italian public for taking this man to task. Although, if I have one note, it would be that you're already given all of these wonderful insults to throw at each other. So why not go with like Pittori da bottega,
Vipera,
Rospo?
I mean, there's just something. I will say there is something that really hits different about an Italian crowd yelling buffone at you. It's pretty good. Bizarre story. I'm glad that this was a slow news week, so this could bubble to the top, because I feel like this might be one that kind of stayed pretty local. But this is a weird one. I don't know what to make about it.
Well, I mean, in this article, it's actually a Spanish article we're getting this from. There's intrigue there. Something about it should be remembered that the music director Alberto Veronese, appeared at on the Maloney party list of the last regional elections in Lombardy.
So there's some political intrigue.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about
You're telling
Lombardy
me that
politics.
Are you telling me Maloney is the kind of neo-fascist prime minister? Okay. So are you telling me that fascists have conservative artistic tastes and often use that as a Trojan horse to smuggle their political agenda into mainstream conversation?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like, I don't know the specific political leanings of the conductor or the production artists in general, but I suspect if I go and learn about local Italian politics, I shall come out with a strong opinion. So let me know what my strong opinion should be. operaboxscore@gmail.com. I love pandering to my audience. Speaking of,
not pandering, but communicating.
Communicating. This is our latest issue of Rashvelishvili Watch.
Yeah, it's too bad Ashley had to step away to go to rehearsal, but yeah, I mean, Rashvelishvili has been canceling a lot this summer, and actually since she gave birth to her child. How old is her child now?
They posted about it on Facebook end of November 2021, so 20-month-old at this point, plus or minus. My math is right.
So I guess her early motherhood has not been easy for her, but we actually don't know. Her message is sort of cryptic, and it's none of our business. But we do adore Anita Rashvelishvili. We want her to come on the show and tell us all about it. We have these episodes about motherhood, so I'd love to hear her story. Her husband is super hot. So we'll take him too if he wants to be our Inside the Huddle.
That could be just an interview just for Oliver. I hope she's doing. She seems to be. She says she's doing better. She says she wants to talk about it a little bit more. In the social media post.
Maybe she's got that same prescription that Jonas Kaufman's got.
Maybe
special cocktail.
Yeah, it's just it's or maybe Jonas.
I don't think being yelled at by Brigitte Fassbender is what's ailing her.
You can't treat that with antibiotics, unfortunately. Another thing you can't treat in antibiotics is leaving the canon at Bayreuth. This is a world-shattering.
Yeah, how are we going to get an exclusive interview with Weston and Katharina Wagner?
Honestly, I would love that interview. I feel like it's going to be the most awkward interview of all time, but I would love that. So this is kind of interesting too, because one, Rienzi, of course, was Wagner's first big hit. It was legitimately, extremely popular.
It's been called Meyerbeer's best opera, which is a great line.
That's probably why Wagner later on was like, maybe not, because I have burned all my bridges with Meyerbeer.
And then some.
And then some. It's a long piece, but that's not a obstacle if you're already going to Bayreuth, but it's kind of fascinating to me because I always thought that the Flying Dutchman should not be part of the canon because it feels closer to Rienzi, at least to me, than anything after Dutchman. But I think people are out there looking for alternatives to normal programming. I know. I'm excited for the Defane production. I think we're also with Rienzi. You also start to run up against the. I feel like the renewed interest in Wagner's early operas have been driven almost by the HIP sort of movement, because those feel more like products of their time than anything Wagner did, after
Right, you're
Dutchman.
looking for the seeds of what would become his new idiom, but
exactly. You see a 19th century German composer doing a fairly typical. I mean, Rienzi was pushing the boundaries a little bit, but still, everything in there is precedented, right? And I think that people are fascinated by that now in a way they were not, or at least Wagner was not, with his own works, despite the popularity of Rienzi. I also think it's kind of strange because this announcement came. Obviously, this is for 2026, and as far as I can tell, this news was broken during an interview with Katharina Wagner where she was basically deploring the use of Wagner's name in the Wagner Group, the Russian mercenary group that tried a coup a couple weeks ago. And part of the reason that they're named the Wagner Group is because, they were founded in very sort of, that's how we say, schmatzy sort of circumstances. And so she was, it seemed to be an interesting logical leap from how do I distance, Wagner's name once again from the Nazi question. And her answer was like, go back to Rienzi. I just think psychologically that's a fascinating thing. I'm not entirely sure because I'm like reading between the lines. I can only find one article in German about this. And for all I know, this was something that was in the works for a long time. But once again, Katharina Wagner, if you want to come on our show so I can ask you these hard-hitting questions about Rienzi, please do. And I just want to know, is Richard Wagner really turning in his grave? Let's find out what other things might be making us turn in our graves with Good Call, Bad Call.
Good call, bad call on Opera Box Score.
That's right, it's Good Call, Bad Call, how we end the show around these parts. Oliver Camacho, what do you have for me?
Well, I have both a good call and a bad call that's related to the same person, and that would be Sparkle Jams herself, Tracy Cox, who, I'll start with the bad call, posted a story, I guess it was last week at this point, that was very, very hard to get through. It's infuriating experience that she had with her partner and Southwest Airlines. So as you know, Tracy Cox is a fat advocate or a large person advocate. I don't know what the terminology is yet. I'm going to mess it up and I'm sorry. But, she's very pro-body, and she, made a reservation or bought tickets to fly on Southwest Airlines with her partner. And Southwest Airlines has this accommodation that they have for larger people where you can reserve the second seat next to you so that you don't infringe upon somebody's space. So they went through that process and made sure that they had appropriate space on the flight. And I guess the operations person came on the plane and asked her partner to move because they needed to seat somebody in that seat. And, it just became this really awkward, uncomfortable thing where her partner was just completely embarrassed and shamed in front of all the other passengers for being a large person. And so she tells this story on her Instagram. So if you follow her, you probably saw this. It was really, really upsetting. And of course, it got shared by her. I don't know how many followers she has, thousands, because we love her. So that more people know about this indignity that sometimes people have to experience just for being themselves. They didn't do anything wrong, and they tried to do the right thing on top of that. The good call is that Tracy Cox announced today that she is engaged to her partner, which is so wonderful. So congratulations to Tracy and
That's
Rachel.
Wonderful.
That's good news, and we're very happy for you.
Matt Cummings.
Got some congratulations to join on to. Mine go out to our many friends of the show who got some love from Opera America in their round of Next Stage Grants program that was announced this week. That list includes Wong Ro for Chicago Opera Theater's Book of Mountains and Seas, David T. Little and Royce Vavrek for Vinken Sport at Opera Parallel, Jorge Martin and Dolores Koch for friend of the show Opera Southwest Before Night Falls, Paul Moravec and friend of the show Mark Campbell for Virginia Opera's Sanctuary Road. Other winners who are not yet friends of the show, but we're working on it, include William Grant Still and Verna Arvey for LA Opera's Highway 1 USA, and Janine Tesori and Tazwell Thompson for the ever-present Blue at New Orleans Opera. Congratulations.
I mean, this is what I always say, being a guest on Opera Box Score really pays off. So
it'll win you grants galore.
If you're trying to pay for a little bit extra on the next Bayreuth season, come on over. I have a good call since George isn't here. Go out and if you can, check out Verdi's Attila with Opera Festival Chicago. It will be on the day this podcast drops, Thursday, and Sunday as well, with our very own George Cedarquist directing, kind of at the last minute too. So definitely check that out, and hopefully won't be too mad at me for promoting his work.
I know, a double George. No George here to stop you from doing a good call about George.
That's true. I've really outplayed him this time. That is it for this week's edition of America's Talk Radio Show about opera. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Send us a voice memo or email us your hot takes at operaboxscore@gmail.com. Find links to stuff we've talked about at our website, operaboxscore.com. That's also where you can put your money where our mouths are. Give back to the OBS on our donate page. Our announcer is Norm Woodell. The creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. For co-hosts Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave, I'm host and audio editor Weston Williams, asking you to continue the conversation about opera while you begrudgingly admit Rienzi into your festival season. We're back with an all-new show next week when we find out which opera Oliver puts in the ring with Figaro and Cosi. Will it be Act 2 of Apollo and Hyacinth? Plus, you get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and more fermatas. Join us.